Welcome, curious minds, to another deep dive.
Great to be here.
Today, we're plunging headfirst into a truly pivotal, yet often understated chapter in the Eritrean War of Independence.
Yeah, a chapter that really highlights resilience, doesn't it? And strategy.
Absolutely. It's a story about an astonishing reversal of fortunes that, well, undeniably reshaped the course of a nation.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for those of you who have been with us on this extraordinary journey, you'll recall we've meticulously explored the first 6 major offensives.
That's right, launched by the Derg regime against the EPLF freedom fighters. Big campaigns.
Huge campaigns. We looked at the sheer scale, the resources poured in by Ethiopia, and the incredible resistance from the Eritrean People's Liberation Front,
Yeah.
often against all odds.
Truly against all odds.
So if you haven't had a chance to listen to those previous deep dives, we really do recommend going back to catch up.
Yeah, they definitely set the stage. Understanding those earlier struggles makes what we're talking about today even more significant.
Exactly. The cost of those battles, the context, it's crucial. Because today, we're squarely focusing on the 7th of these colossal military campaigns.
The 7th one.
It's a conflict often whispered about, rather than shouted from the rooftops, known simply as the Stealth Offensive of 1983.
And that name itself, stealth offensive, tells you a lot, doesn't it?
It really does. It offers a potent hint about its, well, utterly unique and kind of desperate character.
What's particularly striking, I think, is the almost pathological desire of the Derg regime for this one to remain an absolute secret.
Right, under Mengistu Haile Mariam, a total departure from before.
A complete 180-degree turn, really, especially if you think back to the massive, highly publicized Red Star campaign just the year before in '82.
Oh yeah, that was all fanfare, wasn't it? International media, big pronouncements.
Exactly. Extravagant fanfare, declarations of inevitable victory, only for it to end in, well, devastating failure.
And huge public embarrassment for them.
Immense embarrassment. So in stark contrast, this 7th offensive, the stealth offensive, was launched with an almost eerie silence.
Unsettling, you said.
Yeah, unsettling. No fanfare, no bombastic announcements, no parades for the troops. Just quiet, almost clandestine mobilization.
Aimed at total surprise.
Total surprise. And, maybe more importantly, avoiding another public relations disaster that could cripple the regime. They couldn't afford another Red Star.
So our mission for this deep dive, then, is to really peel back the layers of this so-called stealth operation. We're going to explore the precise reasons why the Derg felt compelled to launch such a major offensive under this shroud of secrecy.
What they were hoping to achieve given those recent setbacks.
Exactly. And the truly dire circumstances the EPLF faced, bracing for yet another massive assault.
And they were dire, make no mistake.
And crucially, how this quiet, desperate gamble ended up becoming such a monumental turning point in the entire conflict.
It really was monumental.
We'll look at the tactical maneuvers, delve into the surprising, audacious resilience of the EPLF,
Which is just incredible.
and dissect the lasting implications that rippled out for years, fundamentally reshaping the trajectory and ultimately the outcome of the entire war. Okay, so let's unpack this. With the failure of Red Star looming large, what was driving the Derg to attempt this kind of high-stakes, covert operation in early '83?
What was going on internally?
Yeah, what was the state of the Ethiopian military junta that pushed them towards this strategy?
Well, you hit on a critical point right there. The Derg, under Mengistu, was, and this isn't an exaggeration, in a truly desperate state.
Desperate how? Militarily, politically.
Both, really. That failure of the Red Star campaign in '82 wasn't just a PR disaster. It had quite literally bled them dry.
In terms of manpower.
Manpower, absolutely, and morale, too. The sources are clear on this. By early 1983, they had lost nearly 90,000 troops in that single campaign.
90,000. Just let that sink in.
It's staggering. To give you some perspective, that's more combatants lost than the U.S. suffered in the entire Korean War.
Wow. In just one campaign.
In one campaign, it basically decimated nearly a quarter of their standing army at the time. They were reeling.
Militarily, psychologically?
Completely. Ranks thinned, equipment degraded, public trust eroded, both at home and, internationally.
So this raised a huge question for the leadership.
An existential question, really. How do you possibly regain momentum? How do you regain credibility?
Not just with your own people, but with allies, too. Like the Soviets.
Exactly. The Soviets had invested so much, the Derg were frustrated, humiliated. Their big strategy of overwhelming force, public spectacle, it had failed. demonstrably.
So they decided to try again.
They chose to roll the dice one more time, commit massive resources again, but this time, total silence.
No cameras, no crowds.
Just pure brutal combat. Their core belief, or maybe their desperate hope, was that the EPLF was critically weakened from the 6th Offensive.
They thought they were ripe for a quick, decisive blow.
Precisely. A blow delivered without the world watching. Salvage some victory, avoid another public humiliation. Silence was their only remaining strategic advantage, or so they thought.
So it really does sound like a quiet gamble, driven by this need to save face and this perception, maybe misperception, of enemy weakness.
A misperception based on flawed intelligence, perhaps, which, as you say, is often a recipe for disaster.
You mentioned that Derg thought the EPLF was critically weakened. Was that accurate? Or another big miscalculation?
Was the EPLF really on its last legs?
Yeah, after everything they'd been through.
Well, it's absolutely true that the 6th Offensive, the one right before this, had severely drained the EPLF.
Okay.
The sources are pretty consistent. They indicate more than half their combatants had been lost or incapacitated.
More than half. That's immense.
Imagine that. Over 50% of your fighting force gone dead, wounded, captured. Any military force would be reeling.
Severely compromised.
Deeply vulnerable, almost existential state, no doubt about it. The physical toll, the logistics of replacing fighters, maintaining morale, it was almost insurmountable.
But there's a but here, isn't there?
There's a huge but. What the Derg fundamentally failed to account for, their fatal miscalculation, was the EPLF's extraordinary capacity for, well, perseverance, dedication, and sheer creativity.
They weren't just ragtag guerrillas.
Not anymore, not by this point. They developed this, you could call it adaptive resilience, a foundational strength beyond just numbers.
What does that mean, adaptive resilience?
It means a deep commitment to the cause, a resolve not easily broken by casualty counts. They learned from every previous fight, analyzed, consolidated experience, forged this unique, disciplined fighting spirit.
Something you can't measure easily.
Exactly, not by traditional military metrics. Their real strength wasn't just headcount, it was collective spirit, innovation under pressure, belief in victory.
A resilience the Derg just couldn't grasp.
Couldn't comprehend or account for it.
So, numerically disadvantaged, yes. Gravely so. But not in spirit or ingenuity or will.
Precisely.
And the timing is interesting, too. This offensive launched March 26, 1983. About 7 months after the 6th Offensive ended.
Right, that 7-month window. It seems brief, but it was just enough time for the EPLF to start the process.
The process of regrouping, resupplying.
Regrouping, scrounging for supplies, and crucially strategizing for what they knew was coming eventually.
So they were still rebuilding when the hammer fell again.
Still bandaging their wounds, essentially. It presented them with a truly formidable, almost existential challenge.
And this is where it gets really interesting, the stealth part. How stealthy was it in practice? What kind of forces did the Derg actually deploy?
Remarkably stealthy, especially at the start. It lived up to the name initially.
How many troops are we talking?
The sources describe a monumental force, 120,000 Ethiopian troops.
120,000.
Yes. Roughly equivalent to, say, the entire active military of a country like Portugal today.
Wow. Moving quietly towards EPLF strongholds.
Exactly. Imagine the logistics of moving that many people, heavy equipment, supplies, all under the cloak of night. Total secrecy.
No fanfare, no announcement?
Nothing that could tip off the EPLF or attract international attention. This obsessive secrecy just underscores their desperation to avoid another Red Star replay.
They'd learned that lesson the hard way.
The very hard way.
And their targets?
Were they strategic?
Oh, highly strategic. Hall, Kirkabet, and Nakfa.
Okay, tell us about those. Why were they so important?
Well, they were vital arteries for the EPLF. Hall was a key forward-base logistical hub for the Western lowlands. Kirkabet was often a major fortified front line, a gateway into EPLF territory.
Hey, Nakfa. That name comes up a lot.
Nakfa was the legendary stronghold. Symbolic. The Derg had tried and failed humiliatingly to capture it before.
So the aim was clear. Hit the core.
Hit the core of their operations and their symbolism, deliver a swift, silent, decisive knockout blow before anyone really knew what was happening. So, March 26, 1983, this huge force attacks. What happened on the ground initially? Did they get that breakthrough?
Well, using that overwhelming number advantage and the element of surprise, they launched this multi-pronged assault. And yes, initially they achieved some frightening successes.
Frightening for the EPLF.
Absolutely. Must have given the Derg commanders a flicker of hope, that this gamble might finally pay off.
What did they achieve?
They briefly but decisively overran the Kirkabet front. That was a significant defensive line. Losing it was a profound blow, opened up a route into EPLF territory.
So the EPLF was forced back there.
Forced into a desperate tactical retreat, the fighting was ferocious.
And elsewhere.
They also managed to capture Azmat. The sources call it a crucial junction, strategically located between Nakfa and Barca.
Why was Azmat so important?
Controlling Azmat meant the Derg could potentially split EPLF forces, cut vital supply lines, maybe even use it as a launch pad to isolate Nakfa itself.
Which had always eluded them.
Exactly. So for a terrifying moment, it really seems like the Derg's gamble might be working. They were seizing key ground, inflicting immediate damage.
The EPLF must have been reeling.
Pushed back, struggling against these overwhelming numbers appearing seemingly out of nowhere. Units found themselves outflanked, isolated, fighting for their lives.
That sounds utterly terrifying. Imagine being an EPLF fighter, then exhausted, outnumbered, maybe 10 to 1.
Watching lines crumble, hearing that eerie silence of the advance.
Just a desperate fight for survival. How did they possibly prevent a complete collapse, a force so depleted facing this?
What was that immediate response?
So that initial momentum for the Derg, those gains at Kirkabet and Azmat,
Yeah.
it didn't last.
No, it certainly did not last. And this is where that EPLF perseverance, dedication, and creativity we talked about really comes into play.
It wasn't just about holding on.
No, it proved decisive. Instead of crumbling, the EPLF countered with remarkable speed, audacity, decisiveness.
Weak units.
Units like the 23rd and 80th Brigades, ones that had been really battered in the 6th Offensive, they regrouped incredibly quickly.
How did they manage that?
Often under the cover of night, using their intimate knowledge of the terrain, their adaptable command structure. It wasn't slow. It was rapid, efficient, targeted. They knew time was critical. It really raises questions about their command, their fighter's spirit.
To reorganize and counterattack so fast.
Yeah.
After such losses, facing those numbers.
It shows incredible discipline, extraordinary morale, brilliant leadership. There are accounts of commanders moving foxhole to foxhole, rebuilding resolve.
Not just giving orders.
No, instilling purpose. It shows a force capable of independent thought, rapid adaptation, agile execution, even in the direst circumstances.
They understood the stakes.
Absolutely. They reacted with this ferocious, disciplined determination that just defied conventional military logic.
And the results. Did this audacious counteroffensive work quickly?
Astonishingly swift, within days, not weeks, days.
What did they achieve?
They'd not only recaptured Azmat, that crucial junction, but they had decisively pushed the Ethiopian forces back from the Kirkabet front.
A complete reversal of the Derg's initial gains.
A direct reversal. And simultaneously, they held firm at Hahal, denying the Derg their third objective. Stop the assault dead in its tracks.
A stealth was broken.
Broken. Not just the secrecy, but the Derg's ability to achieve their goals without massive public resistance. The cost was mounting catastrophically for them.
Shockwaves through the Ethiopian command, I imagine.
Absolutely.
So the Derg's quiet collapse began, even as they tried to keep it under wraps. What were the tangible losses for them? Beyond territory.
Devastating losses. The sources indicate around 25,000 troops dead and wounded.
25,000. That's almost incomprehensible for a stealth operation.
It's roughly the size of the entire standing army of, say, Ireland or Finland today, wiped out in a relatively short campaign.
Implies incredibly intense fighting.
Intense, brutal, close-quarters fighting, even in that short time frame. The scale of casualties suggests the EPLF counteroffensive wasn't just effective, it was incredibly lethal.
How did they manage that?
Using terrain knowledge, motivated fighters, adaptable command, they trapped and decimated Derg units, turned a planned silent victory into a grinding, bloody defeat. Some texts say the Derg army was finished for good after this.
In a specific sense, yes. Not the immediate collapse of the whole regime, but the decisive end of their offensive capacity on this Eritrean front. A crippling blow.
Crippling. Psychologically and militarily, secrecy couldn't hide the sheer human and material cost of this colossal failure.
And the implications for their future efforts in Eritrea.
Profoundly negative. Marked a significant strategic paralysis.
And it wasn't just battlefield losses, was it? You mentioned broader consequences.
Right. Systemic consequences. Morale, already fragile after Red Star, was utterly shattered.
Another massive effort crumbled.
Exactly. And it extended beyond the military. Agriculture in regions like Senhit and Sahel was ruined.
By the fighting.
Both. Fighting, Massive troop movements, requisitioning food, but also deliberate scorched earth tactics by the Derg.
Destroying resources to deny the enemy. Brutal.
Added immense civilian hardship, famine, and further demoralized the Derg troops, many of whom came from those areas. Their families were suffering.
And what about their backers? The Soviets.
Ah, yes. Even that seemingly endless flow of Soviet aid, their military backbone, started to feel insufficient.
Did the Soviets cut them off?
Not immediately cut off, perhaps, but the sheer scale of this quiet failure, the Derg's inability to win despite vast support, it became undeniable to Moscow.
They started questioning the investment.
Right, the efficacy of it all. The Derg's reliance on external support looked increasingly futile against such persistent defeats. It signaled a deeper crisis for their long-term viability in the war.
This really feels like more than just another victory for the EPLF. It sounds transformative, like it forged them into something new.
That's a great way to put it. It was transformative. What's remarkable is they didn't just defend and survive.
They learned from it.
Actively used it as a profound learning moment. A crucible. After the Derg retreated in June '83, the EPLF immediately began a significant, systematic reorganization.
How so? What did they change?
Analyzed strength, weaknesses, streamlined command structures, improved logistics, refined tactics based on hard-won lessons.
Like what specifically?
Well, one key thing was a shift towards more decentralized decision-making, empowering frontline commanders more.
A counter to the Derg's rigid structure.
Exactly. Allowed for much greater agility in battle. The result was they grew demonstrably stronger, more mobile, vastly more coordinated.
Which raises that question. How did they adapt so quickly under such pressure after such losses?
It really speaks volumes about their leadership's foresight, their capacity for self-criticism, and the fighters' dedication to evolve.
Turning near defeat into a catalyst for growth.
Precisely. Becoming this semi-conventional force capable of much more than just guerrilla fighting.
So this was the crucible, from maybe ragtag guerrillas to a structured, disciplined, sophisticated force.
Transforming an army. Transitioning from survival to developing a real strategic offensive capability. That reshaped the war.
Because this stealth offensive, despite the Derg wanting to bury it, became this critical turning point.
Undeniable turning point. Emboldened by the success, galvanized by their new strength, the EPLF didn't just go back to defense.
They started planning their own offensive.
Exactly. Shifting from reacting to dictating the terms of engagement, seizing the strategic initiative, a huge psychological and tactical shift.
And the gains weren't just strategic. You mentioned material gains, too.
Oh, incredible material gains. Colossal, really.
From the retreating enemy.
Absolutely. They captured an unbelievable amount of weaponry from the demoralized Ethiopian army. Heavy stuff.
Like what?
Soviet T-54 and T-55 tanks, that was an enormous upgrade for them.
They didn't have tanks before.
Primarily light arms, captured artillery, improvised weapons. Getting these tanks, plus rocket launchers, field artillery, modern radios. It was a game changer.
Turning the Derg's own weapons against them.
Systematically. It fundamentally altered the firepower balance on the ground.
So it wasn't just replenishing supplies.
It was significantly upgrading their entire arsenal, shifting the balance of power, quietly but decisively.
Proof that resistance pays off.
Concrete proof. Even against one of Africa's most militarized regimes, backed by the Soviets, the EPLF could withstand, emerge stronger, better equipped, ready to take the fight to them.
Will and ingenuity over sheer material superiority.
A stark demonstration of it.
So if Red Star was the noisy public failure,
Shattering their image.
then the stealth offensive was the quiet internal collapse, hollowing them out.
That's the crux of it. This campaign they tried to keep secret marked the true, irreversible beginning of the end for their control in Eritrea.
Not immediate collapse, but the momentum shift was irreversible.
Decisively shifted to the EPLF. The psychological cost, the material cost, the inability to win even with surprise in numbers, it crippled their will and capacity for more large-scale offensives like this.
And the long-term implications, you said it paved the way for later victories.
Profound implications. This quiet failure paved the way strategically, psychologically, materially for massive EPLF victories later. The confidence, the reorganization, the captured weapons, especially those tanks, all contributed directly to legendary victories. Like Alphabet in 1988.
Alphabet. We'll have to cover that.
Oh, yes. A battle that crushed the Ethiopian army in the region. And then by 1990, seizing the port of Massawa.
Strangling their supply lines.
Effectively sealing their fate in Eritrea. But it all started right here, with the Derg's silent failure and the EPLF's audacious transformative resilience. #outro.
What an absolutely gripping deep dive this has been. The stealth offensive of 1983 really does show how sometimes the quietest battles
The ones with the least fanfare.
are the ones that change absolutely everything. A testament to how numbers can be overcome by perseverance, dedication, creative thinking
Unwavering perseverance.
against seemingly insurmountable odds.
And for you, the learner, this story raises a really important question, I think. Beyond the battlefield, when you face overwhelming odds, personal challenges, professional ones, broader struggles, where do you find your own resilience, your adaptability?
That's a powerful question.
The EPLF found theirs in unity, constant evolution, belief in their cause, turning near defeat into a springboard for victory. It's a timeless lesson, really.
Turning adversity into strength.
Exactly.
Well, that's all for this deep dive into the stealth offensive and its far-reaching consequences.
A pivotal moment.
Indeed. Next time, we'll continue this incredible story. We'll delve into the Battle of Alphabet,
Yes, Alphabet. Eritrea's Dien Bien Phu, as some call it.
a truly cataclysmic engagement that reshaped the war dramatically, leading towards that final push. You won't want to miss it.
Definitely not.
Until then, keep asking questions. Keep digging deeper into the stories that matter.
And offer those profound lessons.
And remember, sometimes the most significant shifts, the most pivotal turning points happen not with a bang, but in the quietest, most unexpected moments.